Right, I'm going to do another video about brewing a bag. Today I'm doing it a little bit different. I'm doing it on the stovetop in my boiler, and also I'm going to do a no chill. And I wanted to kind of do a little bit of breakdown about some of the things that I've read recently about it. Not really a guide as such, but just the way that I'm going to do it, and just addressing a few questions that some people have asked on my thing, and I thought it'd be worthwhile making another video for it. So today it's just a boil pan on the stove. This is a 33 litre boiler, and it has the tap and the hot stopper inside it. It's when you're draining the water off. A few people have been asking about what sort of pot size. You can have quite a small pot. I'm not sure the exact smallest pot you can have to do like a 4 litre batch, because you can do a thing called a maxi brewing bag, which I explained last week, where you can sparge and top up your water at the end, kind of like diluting the wort. So you start with a higher gravity, or finish rather with a higher gravity wort, and then dilute back. But for me personally, the whole sort of, if you're going to start out, why not start out with a bigger pot, so that you can kind of cover both of them. I mean, 33 litre is kind of touching the limits of being able to do a full 23 litre batch, purely because the amount of water you add is your total volume, and the displacement of the grains as well. So that's going to make the water level rise. So you've got to bear that in mind. I mean, I think really you need something like at least a 40 litre, maybe even a 50 litre pot, just to be safe. But then you kind of you touch the problem of, can you get it to a good boil on your stove, and then you're sort of brewing outside. You need a burner, which is fine, but for me in the flat, I want to be able to do it on my stovetop. So for me, the 33 litre boiler is working out fine. I've been tending to just do 10 litre batches. I think Ben's got the exact same kind of boiler. You can do sort of like 15, maybe push it up to about 16, 17. But you've got to bear in mind how much it's all going to sort of displace once the grains and the total water's in there. But 10 litre batches work better for me now, purely because I like a 23 litre batch, so that I've got a good stock. But then when I'm doing experimental recipes, I only like to do 10 litres, because if it's pants, I don't want loads of it lying around. And if it's good, I can brew it again. I can scale it up. So another thing I wanted to touch on was sort of software that you can use. I do recommend, if you're going to do brew in the bag, you go into brewinabag.brewer.info, I think it is. That forum has just a wealth of information that you can sort of ask as many questions like those chaps over there really know what they're doing. There's also a calculator. It's brewinabagicus, I think it's called. I've tinkered around with it a little bit, starting to get my head around it a bit more. And you can put your pot size. You take your height measurement, your width measurement, and it will calculate all your kind of volumes that you need for your boil day kind of thing. So I can recommend that. There's also Beersmith. You can get the free trial, or you can pay for the full version. There's also, I think is it Brewmate, I think is another good software. That which is free as well. All kind of good softwares as well to sort of work out once you know your losses and your boil off volumes and your loss to the boiler, that that it won't drain off. You can work out how much volume you need to start with. So for instance, today I'm doing a 10 litre final volume in the fermenter. I'm starting out with about 20 litres. So that gives you an idea of why you need a bigger pot, because you're going to have boil off, you're going to have grains absorbing it. There might be a little bit of loss to the actual boiler where you can't get out, your dead space. So there's all those things to take into consideration when, even though you're only ending up with 10 litres, you're going to need to start with almost, for me, in this pot particularly, twice the amount of water. So there's things to take into consideration of, why you could possibly, start with a bigger pot in the first place. In this pot, I think with the tap and the drainer fitted, got mine from the malt miller. I think it was under £80, £75, something like that. So that, and you brew in the bag. I mean, you're looking at probably under £100, and then you're set. Well, other than you probably want to get something like a strainer, so you can put your bag in over the top so it can drain out. I'd say a bit of hose to put on the end of the tap, some nice good heavy duty silicone hose, so you can drain the water out into your fermenter or your no chill cube. And other than that, I mean, I've got a thermometer actually on the pot on this one. You could just have a separate thermometer, it's not necessary. You're sort of done for under £100, you're good to go. And that brings me on to something else where I think brewing a bag gets bad press, in that a lot of people seem to perceive that it's not all grain brewing, or it's exactly the same. And I think a lot of times you read on forums and that people seem to feel that when they've got the 3-vessel system, it's superior to brewing the bag, which is far from it. I mean, there's questions of whether the efficiency is good in brewing the bag. Well, I'll come on to that in a minute, but there's loads of different sort of things, and it just seems a little bit unfair that people that have a 3-vessel system feel that their brewing thing is any more superior than brewing the bag, when brewing the bag beers have won national competitions. So, I mean, that says it all. If it can win a competition brewed on that level, it doesn't really matter the system that you're running. If you're still producing a fantastic beer at the end of it, that's all that matters. And if it wins a competition, what more seal of approval do you need than that? So, you know, I kind of want to put that, because you feel some forums, people a little bit sort of bash the brew in the bag, and maybe some people sort of skim over it and feel that they've got to go out and buy 3 different pots to be able to do all grain brewing, which is unnecessary and it's untrue. So it's certainly, for me, made brew day a lot easier and a lot stress free when there's children and, you know, you've got family commitments. It's making life a little bit easier. I mean, not to say that I wouldn't like a 3-vessel setup. They look lovely. If I had the space in a garage, I probably would. But I don't know, brewing the bag's been so kind to me lately that maybe I never will. So there's another thing with efficiency. A lot of people say that it's not as efficient. From what I've read on the forums and what I've experienced, it can be just as efficient as a 3-tier system. And the efficiency, you can kind of worry about it and do things to adjust for it. Or, like I've seen in a lot of places and read a lot of places, you can just up the grain to combat that. You know, the efficiency is basically how efficient your system is at getting the sugars out of the grain to produce the gravity you need to make the beer. When you're using beer software, it's good to know what your system is running, because you can repeatability. You can do the same recipe and get the same gravity every time. But, you know, if say you use 3 kilos of grain and your gravity only comes out to a certain amount, you can know next time you can adjust for that and add a little bit more grain. I mean, grain is kind of inexpensive, if you like. I think the amount of grain you're going to add to up the efficiency, you can do that. I mean, what's that worth? There are other ways that people say to combat it. They say that you can do a finer crush. Now, some people go crazy and crush it to it's like you're getting loads of the flour. Now, I've read on a lot of forums that can be bad as well, because when you pull your bag, you've got like a load of flour at the bottom, and that retains too much water. It kind of makes like a barrier, if you like, stopping all the water draining out. So I've read that you should double mill it. I've read that you shouldn't crush it too fine. There's fors and against it. And there's also boil times. They say that you should mash as well for 90 minutes. You should do a mash out, which is raising your temperature of your mash to about 75 degrees, and then you hold that for about another 10 minutes to make the sugars thinner, I believe it is, so that you can get more extraction from it. Then there's a 90-minute boil. There's lots of reasons for that. They say that it definitely combats against having any DMS in your beers. You don't have that sweet kind of popcorny flavour in the finished product. But then I read a lot of people that say that doesn't matter. What I find with brewing, and a lot of advice out there, is a lot of things contradict each other. Boil times and mash times, I mean, professional brewers do use sort of 90-minute boils and that for good reason. And I think there's a lot of science in that. But with the crush of the grain, then there's squeezing the bag. Do you squeeze the bag? Some people squeeze. Some people say don't squeeze because you extract tannins from the grain. Some people have squeezed the bag and had no problems. I mean, it's kind of, I could say all this and everyone could say, well, you know, ask the question, do I squeeze my bag? And I've found myself asking that, and I think the only way to sort of do it is take a little bit of all the information that you read for certain things with brewing. And obviously, like in books, there's going to be sound advice, you know, it's written by professionals and that, and there's going to be other advice where you read on a forum that someone else does that works for them, but it might not work for you. And I think the general rule of thumb is to kind of do what works for you. I mean, today I'm going to do a 60-minute boil and a 60-minute mash. It might not be the right way. If it produces a bad beer, or I get a kind of off flavour, then I'll know next time maybe I should have done the 90-minute mash. Maybe I should have done a 90-minute boil. But for me today, it's all about saving time, so I'm going to do 60-60 and then do the no chill. But it's, you know, it's not, there's no set in stone of how you should do it, I think. I mean, I've even done lesser boils. I've done 30-minute boils and 15-minute boils. With really hoppy beers, I've not noticed the difference, but it's not to say that you should do it. I mean, I think 30 minutes is probably the bare minimum. I probably wouldn't do a 15-minute. Again, it was great, but I just don't. It doesn't feel right boiling for only that amount of time. But my minimum boil was 60 minutes, I think. Last week I did a 90-minute mash and a 90-minute boil. That was fine. Obviously, you've got to bear in mind it's going to take longer. The brew day is going to take longer. And the other thing is the no chill cube. Today I'm not chilling it down with a conventional chiller. It's literally going into this little 10-litre container. So as soon as the boil's over, the hose will go on and the hot water comes straight out into that container. Squeeze some of the air out, or as much as possible, screw the lid on, move it around so all the sides are sanitised, and then leave it. Now, there's a lot of information as well about no chilling, and again there's a lot of conflicting information about no chilling, purely because it hasn't been, in my mind, researched enough by anyone of any kind of real kind of like scientific capacity to say this is what you should do, this is definitely what you shouldn't do. You know, there's lots of variables in it. The great thing of it is it saves water. That's the main thing. A lot of the Australian brewers do it because they're on like a water meter. They pay a lot for their water rates, so they want to save water. And it does waste a lot of water using the chiller. When I done mine last week, I filled up a 25-litre fermenter of the first hot water to come out, and I probably would have filled up maybe another one or two. So it's quite a lot of water wastage, and it's time. And if your time is chilling down, that's straight into that container and it's sealed up. Then there's another option that you can keep it in that container for a little while. You could store it in there, and also you could run off a bit of your wort from the boil day of that day, keep it in a container, cool it down, or in a sanitised container, and make a yeast starter. So it gives you time to make a yeast starter from the wort that you're using from that beer. Then once your beer is cooled down, you can tip it out of your container into your fermenter, which is going to aerate it, and then tip in your yeast starter. So it allows you time to pitch your yeast and also ferment your beer when you want. This brings me on to another subject. From the Brewing Bag forum, there's a chap called Bob Stempski who's done loads of experiments with no chill, and I'll try and put a link down to the bottom because he done loads with basic brewing, and he did tests where he kept no chill cubes for a quite extended period of time, and then did a test of what they would taste like. I mean, we're talking some of them were quite a few months old. I think the final one lost a little bit of coloration, but I think they all decided that there weren't much in it in terms of taste. There was advice given by an actual independent scientific body that said that you had to be careful because of, you know, the risk of infection and it kind of going bad and you can make yourself ill and whatnot. But I think that most people will probably put it in that container, let it cool down for that night or the next day, and then pitch it the next day. But it is proven by at least a couple of people that you can keep it for longer and ferment when you like. That's entirely up to you. I mean, I think I would definitely pitch mine within a couple of days, but it allows me time to do that. And not only that, because I don't always brew here, I brew somewhere else. I could even take that container somewhere else, pitch it there, and then brew it the next day, which I think is a fantastic option. So I'll put them links down there because they're worth checking out. He's also, Bob Stempski, done experiments on how you do the hop ratios. I had people who ask this: when you do the no chill, do you alter the way that you add the hops, the amount? Because when the hot water's going into the container, you're not chilling it down, so those hops are still isomerizing into the actual hot water. He did a test on that, and I think he alters his bitter addition. I think he either reduces it or moves it. I mean, a lot of programs and calculators will tell you to shift it kind of by about, I think it's 20 minutes, so that your 60 would go into 40, and then your flame out and your 0-minute additions and 5-minute additions go into the actual cube. I think he does it by that he alters his 60-minute addition, and also that his 0-minute and his 5 and 10 minutes go in as a dry hop a few days later. And he's had great success with that. This brings me on to someone else who's also very knowledgeable on the subject, is Tiny from Off Tap Brewing. I put a question to him quite a while back now, asking about how the hop, you know, is affected, and he did a video response. I'll put that down there as well. And he's kind of in my mind, kind of a little bit of an expert in no chill because he's done a lot of it. He knows, he's the man to ask if you've got a question. And he said definitely that he orders the 60-minute edition. He might reduce that a little bit, and then the 0 and the 5-minute editions might go into the cube to do the flavour and the aroma. Just recently he's done another video where he's saying that he's still doing his 60-minute edition adjusted, and then he's making a hop tea where he's putting some of the hops into an amount of water, boiling it up, and then adding the hop tea to the beer, and then he's getting a really good flavour from that. So definitely check out the Bob Stempski links and Tiny from Off Tap Brewing, because they've done what I consider kind of like research, if you like, into kind of the effects of how you add the hops. But I think Tiny said it as well, is just try it, sort of do it one way, try it and get some good beers. You might get some bad beers. I very much doubt you're going to get a beer that's undrinkable, but just to kind of play around with how adding those hops at any given time, or the amounts, because you're doing the no chill, will affect the taste of the beer. But that also kind of, don't stick to one particular thing, because if you don't try the different things, you'll never know how you should do it. There's no hard and fast way of this is how you must do the no chill. I mean, Tiny's always kind of like experimenting with these. It just shows you that you kind of don't go onto one forum and think that's the calculator, that is how I should do it, because it might not work for you, it might not work on your setup. So definitely experiment, play around with that. I'm going to do Tiny's advice there. I'm going to alter my 60-minute edition, so I'm going to reduce it from what the recipe tells me for the IBUs that it says on my software, and just dial it down a little bit, just so that it gives me hopefully not too much bitterness on the final product. And then next week I'm thinking I might get the same grain bill, like a simple smash beer, Marisota and a hop, and then play around with kind of doing the additions. Maybe keep one the same and see how bitter it is. And there's also the option that Off Tap Brewing have done as well, where they just had boiled the wort in the boiler, drained it off into the cube, and the hops are in the cube. So all the hops are in the cube. I'm sure I did one quite similar to that, and that worked pretty well as well. I mean, I think I've done 3 no chills prior to this one, and none of them have produced a bad beer. So it's definitely worth a try. It's a time saver. It's definitely a water saver, and it's something different. Why not give it a go? So I think I've covered everything. I tend to always forget something, but if you've got any questions, fire away. I don't claim to know everything, or this is not how you should do it. But also check out Tiny from Off Tap Brewing, because he's the man for the no chill for sure. Cheers.